Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm particularly honored today to have a chance to meet Wolfgang Merkel. I would say a dear friend and also very keen supporter of this institute through very turbulent times. I think that he's very familiar to many of you, especially those who have been here for a longer period of time, and I would say this is a smaller group of the people. Wolfgang Merkel is currently engaged as senior fellow at CEU Democracy Institute from 2021. Previously, for 16 years, he was heading the democratization unit at BCB, or Social Science Center Berlin, which is one of the, I would say, the most prestigious social science and humanities center in Germany, but also in Europe. And what I know is that he worked for a very long period of time on the issues of democracy and democratization. He published a lot of articles and books, edited a lot of them, and this occasion is actually discussed a bit about the book on resilience to democracy, which is co-edited by Wolfgang and Anne Burman. I would say that this is for us really the right moment to discuss about this. Not only because the institute is the institution which shows some resilience in authoritarian regime, but also because of the fact that we are all very much interested into how and what could be done in order to increase resilience in the countries which are like ours, very much struggling with keeping the democratic institutions. So thank you very much for joining us. I also want to sincerely thank Wolfgang Merkel for enabling this arrival and the meeting, and also for partnering. I mean, one role of the partnering events which we organize together and which are really meaningful for, I would say, social sciences, especially political sciences in our country. So thank you very much. So without further ado, I will let Wolfgang tell us a few words about his thoughts on this topic, and then I will open discussion.
Thank you very much, Gastela. Thank you for being here. Let me start somehow unusual. Yesterday evening or night, my classes fell apart. So there was no battle on the street, and we were even not drunken, but it simply fell apart, so I don't see your faces. This is a wonderful situation, by the way, for a speaker, because then I cannot see the critical faces while I am talking. So I'm talking quite freely, and maybe my classes come back even during the lecture, and when we have the discussion, then I can look into your faces. I basically want to do three things. This is not my idea. This is what Gastela did, and let me say right from the beginning, I don't sell books here. I leave the two books here.
Thank you for leaving the books to us.
I don't sell them because the first one, the one which came out this year with Routledge, it's somehow a ridiculous price policy. I talk to you because I know you are publishing as well, and be careful if you are dealing with especially British publishing houses. It costs 110 British pounds. So no private person will buy it. The rich people, very rich people, are not interested in, and the poorer people don't have the money for it. And so be careful and talk to them beforehand what the price policy is. The second one just came out this week is a German one, and I will talk about the structure and the content of the two books. It just came out, and I negotiated with the German publisher Campus that I will keep all rights for foreign language editions. This is quite important because later on, if you have an offer, if you, for example, publish something in Serbian and then you get an offer for an English publication, then you run sometimes into trouble if it comes to the copyright question. At least I have these experiences with other publishing houses, Springer International, for example. So, three things. I talk about the content of the one and the other book, but the core of my presentation is I want to present an analytical concept to understand what democratic resilience means. But it's more than just understanding. It is the attempt to draw a scheme, to develop an approach with which we can investigate specific cases and can do comparison, especially low comparisons with such a scheme. I presented it not very often up to now, so I'm quite interested in comments and even critical comments. So the first are the two books, and I will say something to the content of the books. This Resilience of Democracy is not written by me. I edited with Anna Lührmann. She became now a Green Minister of State, Undersecretary of State in American, in the German government. And she was a professor at the University of Gothenburg, working with this huge research network of democracy called Varieties of Democracy. Something to the content of it appeared as a special issue first at with the Political Science Review, Democratization, and 2 years later published again as a book. What we try to figure out with all these contributors of the book is how can we understand autocratization. This is a term Anna Lührmann selected. I'm a bit more critical about it. We can discuss it later on. So the process of de-democratization, how it works, and what is sometimes much more difficult, how it can be stopped. So this is part of it. And one of the authors are using a large N comparison, using the data of VDEM, and what comes out with an analysis throughout the 20th century are at least two things. The one is with the increasing number of electoral democracies within the 20th century, the potential of democratic resilience decreased. So all the younger, newer democracies, not all, but many of the newer and democracies are considered to be less resilient than the traditional old one, which have roots within the habits, in the institutional memory and the collective memory of civil society. So this is the first result of it. The second one is if democratic regimes, let's call it for the moment with a minimalist definition, electoral democracy, if they are already on the slippery slope towards authoritarian governments at a certain threshold, 4 out of 5 democracies become autocracies, so open authoritarian regimes. You can think about where your country, for example, is at this stage of autocratization, but statistical experience shows us if you not stop this process of autocratization, not immediately at the beginning, but not too late in the process of de-democratization, then you might not stop them later on. There are three mechanisms which are important to look at, and we can subsume them under the concept of accountability. Democratic or defective or electoral regimes are on this slippery slope, then the first stop should be the so-called horizontal accountability. This is very much the legislature against presidents. It's more complicated with the prime minister, because normally prime minister command a majority within the parliament. So it's parliament, but especially judicial. Judiciary plays an important role in accountability. Judiciary, if it is independent, can stop governments to become more autocratic. Quite interesting to look to the experience of liberal democracy during the pandemic, during the corona pandemic, which important role administrative courts and constitutional courts played against the usurpation of political power beyond the constitution by the executive. But there is a second form of accountability. This is what one can call a diagonal accountability, meaning across the society. Civil society is the main actor of this diagonal accountability. Important right from the beginning, but especially important if these democratic regimes went down the slippery slope. And the last one is, and not least important one, is a vertical accountability. This is a classical accountability where the people can vote authoritarian president, prime minister out of the government. So in such a situation, it depends very much how capable of political action the opposition is. So if you have a very heterogeneous opposition, such as in your country and to some extent in Hungary as well, then it might be very difficult to form and to build up a counterweight to the authoritarian tendencies of the executive. We checked another point, and this might be in your case, in your country case, important, but is important in Germany, in France, in Italy, in other cases as well. This is what we call negative partisanship. This means that not only a right-wing populist party or how many people vote for populist parties, which is easy to experience. We just have to look to the electoral statistics. But what the people think, which party they would never vote for. So this gives you an idea about the potential of right-wing or even left-wing authoritarian tendencies. It's called negative partisanship, and data of Germany in mind. We did a populism barometer 2 years ago, and at that time it was 79% of the German population said in such a survey, we never would vote for a right-wing populist party, and it was only 16% of the population said we never would vote for the Social Democratic Party. But these are bad news for social democracy as well. This tells you, okay, this is a party, we don't have very much against it, but obviously we don't have any enthusiasm anymore for such a big catch-all party. So negative partisanship is a good indicator for it. And last one I want to tell you is about the last chapter before the conclusion. This is an radical modernization theorist piece. So the argument goes, since our societies, the European societies and the societies of the more developed world, but in a way it's valid for all countries we know, societies we know on the globe, that there will be an increase of individual emancipation, of gender, of sexual identity, of being part of the middle class, of having a better education. So the argument says the more this individual emancipation goes forward, the more these people ask for political emancipation. So this is what we know from Paul Parsons, and we know it from Samuel Martin Lipset. And then he said, democracy is unavoidable. Nevertheless, in the long run, this was a critical discussion I had with this author coming from the World Value Survey, using these data very much. I argue in the long run, we are all dead. We must have a theory or an understanding about oscillation. What causes backlashes of this democratic course? So this is basically what we did in this special issue. I come back to the book I wrote on myself, and this is this one on twilight and the fragility and resilience of democracy in the 21st century. The German edition, I'm working on an English one, hoping that Oxford University Press will publish it. And no, I thought I have it here. I have to think about what I was writing in this book. So I don't have it even here. I try to remember. So I had 3 sections in this book, and the first section was democracy as rule. It's a system of rule. The second section was democracy and crisis, and the third one was ambivalence. So then I had, in a true German, Newtonian, Hegelian tradition, for the 3 sections, 5 sub-chapters, and then dealing with questions like, is there a crisis of democracy and war? Remember the idea of the beginning of this century when the neocons in the United States thought we just have to take Iraq, then there will be a domino sequence of falling of authoritarian regimes will take place. So we just have to take out one stone out of these deeply autocratic world in the Near East and the Arab world, then it will happen. So I'm writing about, can we justify to we, the community of democratic states, can we justify to a regime to transform it into a democracy? Now, meanwhile, the traditional aggression war came back to Europe with the Russian attack on Ukraine, and this is a different relationship between democracy and war. Nevertheless, I don't buy this argument. Russia and the Putin regime attacked Ukraine just because it is a democracy and it cannot tolerate flourishing democracies. In the neighborhood, Ukraine was never a flourishing democracy. If you go to the rank of 200 countries in the world before the beginning of the war in the year 2021, VDEM, Varieties of Democracy, ranked it somewhere at place 110. So in the area of Hungary and Poland at that so I was writing about this. I was writing about the end of catch-all parties, or the what I think irreversible decline of these big catch-all parties. We call it Volksparteien in German. This changes our societies, democratic societies, from within. We have a pluralization of party system. We have more heterogeneous coalitions because one and two political parties normally don't find a majority anymore. So you have sometimes three parties, and Germany, for example, now experience a period to just demonstrate how difficult it is to form coherent policies if you have three different political parties. So the catch-all parties, which had their high time during the second half of the 20th centuries, are disappearing. And strange enough, there is one kind of classical big catch-all party in Europe and even the European Union. Which party could it be? Think about it. Big party gaining voters across classes, milieus, and so on.
Green.
Which one?
Green Party.
The Green Party, no, the Green Party is the opposite. Where are them Christians? They disappeared in Italy, for example. The most powerful party of Italy from 1948 up to 91 and 3, when Berlusconi came along. They completely disappeared. This was a classical, the most powerful party. They were permanently in government from 1948 up to 91 and 93, and completely collapsed. So, last call.
The one in Spain, perhaps.
Which one in Spain?
Well, I don't know exactly, but the last time the left one, socialist or what?
The socialist, which is a classical social democratic party. No, I wouldn't call it, but you are right. They are now representing, I think, about 25% of the vote. The classical catch-all party has 40% plus. It is Orban's Fidesz party. It gets votes from all classes across the country, maybe not moral milieus, but this is one of the last of this type. So I should not go on and on with the book. I take chapter 15 out of the book. And chapter 15 is what I'm thinking about, or how can we understand democratic resilience. And what I tried to do is to think about, if we think about theory or developing theoretical mid-range approaches, so to say, usable theories. This was called by Rischemeyer as an idea. So I thought we have to bring together structures, actors, functions of the system, and the interdependencies of these different parts of structures, actors, and function. Only then we can gain an understanding about the dynamic of a political regime. And this is what I'm going to do here. I don't talk anymore about the erosion of democracy. This is what I did yesterday in a presentation. I might show you only one slide, and then I go to this concept, and I'm very interested and curious what you have to say about such an attempt to understand it. This is what I showed yesterday. These are the, let's call it for a moment, the best 33 democracy in the world, how they develop. You see it on the, doesn't work anymore. It does. This is a classical moment where you fail your examination as a doctoral student or professor. This is what I want to show simply. This is the quality of democracy. And these are, as you see, the timeline. And from 1950 until 89, you have a continuous increase in the quality of democracy. We can discuss it, or you can challenge later on. Just to take it, this is one aggregated graph showing the quality of democracy of the 33 more or less democracies, however, including Hungary and Poland as well, because we used all the European member states. And later on, after 89, there was a steep increase in the quality of democracy. And in the year 2008, it stopped. And then from 2008 onwards, it declined. The quality declined year per year per year per year. And there are only very, very few countries which are not affected by this decline of the quality of democracy. One of them is Denmark, one of them is Finland. None of the major democratic countries, especially not the United States from America, where you have not only beginning with Donald Trump, already beginning before a steep decline in the quality of democracy. And I thought I thought I have a slide with your country as well. But if you would have Serbia, then you have a certain increase in the quality of democracy. Then at that time, taken as Yugoslavia, and then it goes down very steeply and goes more down than Hungary and Poland. And this is a very steep and alarming decline to see. So there is an erosion of democracy, and therefore we have not only to analyze it, we have to think about how can we understand it, how can we experience it, how can we measure it, and especially how can we stop it. This is the definition of democratic resilience. It must have three, so to say, capacity. It must be able either to absorb challenges and stressors which impact on the political regime, or withstand, or in your case, it would be recover. Is there, in your case, in your country case, is there a capacity to recover all these democratic losses during this process of autocratization of your country? This means, again, to absorb, withstand, or recover without undergoing a regime change, meaning a clear transition to a different type of political regime. And such a definition has a classical double meaning. It is an analytic descriptive concept, but it's also a normative orientation where the trend should go on. So I was talking about the building blocks. Here since I know you are working, quite a few of you are working on theories, they might accuse me of eclecticism. But this is the way I maneuvered myself very often through my career as a political scientist, thinking about function structures and actors. So to say, which function has a democratic system to fulfill in order to remain a democratic system? And which are the structure? And if we talk about political regimes, about structures, we are talking basically about institutions. It's not, it's different if we are talking about societies, but political regimes, the rules of the game, the institutions, the arena where the political actors interact are important, and certainly the political and social actors as well. How can they contribute? How do they want to contribute? Or how do they don't want to contribute to democratic resilience? And again, as we know, democratic systems are composed by interdependent elements. And therefore, I think one can cover it best by using these three building blocks: function, structures, actions. And this is what I thought out about a night I could not sleep. I was sitting at my desk thinking about how can you draw it as a scheme. And as you all know, the moment where you try to draw a scheme, you suffer under complexity. So this is a conscious attempt to reduce complexity, but certainly we lose information in the way of this system reduction, as Niklas Luhmann would call it. We have what I already told you. We have this basic functions of resilience, which then adapt to new circumstances. And I was talking about recommerce. And what function has a democratic system to fulfill, to survive, or even to flourish in the future is, and this is completely underestimated at the moment, I think, in the public discourse, it's problem solving. It's easily said that political regimes must be able to solve problems. One of the problematic developments we have seen during globalization is climate, migration, inequality, pandemic. These are supranational challenges. And on the other side, the main actors are still nation states. So the nation states need cooperation among themselves in order to counteract the climate crisis, for example. It doesn't matter whether Germany becomes CO2 neutral, because at the same time, and this is what we are trying now, and the goal is to be neutral and free of carbon emissions in 2045. Nevertheless, if Germany gets clean, and at the same time the prices of carbonized energy sources, oil, gas, coal, will go down on the world market, the more the demand of countries and the hunger for energy of countries like India, China, Indonesia, Brazil will increase. And the climate does not distinguish between carbon emission coming from Europe and the other countries. Just to give you one example of how difficult it is to let these different countries cooperate. The governments are elected nation states, society, or the nation state, and this is a kind of responsiveness governments have to the national electoral audience. So problem solving, this is what the people expect. Therefore, strong men and sometimes strong women are in a high demand. The people want to have simple answers to complex problems. And many democratic politicians are not daring to say how difficult this kind of cooperation is, because the moment where they are arguing like this, then right-wing populists will stand up, or competitors will stand up. You don't have a solution, we have it. And this is good for 20, 30, and in some countries for 30, but 40, up to 50%. So the dynamic of the electoral competition is an ambivalent one as well. And I just hint at this fact: fair decisions. What we know, what we can already see, is the transition to a decarbonized post-fossil world, for example, will come with burdens for the society. We will not have simply an extremely productive reorganization of our society, thinking about it in a Schumpeterian way, to have creative destruction at the same time constructing a new political, economic, and social world. It will come with a burden, and we see it already in Germany, and the Greens are maybe the first victims being blamed, that it puts too much burden on people to, because they issued a new law how the people should heat their home. So the transition from fossil energies to solar, and what is the word for utilizing the temperature of the earth, or I don't understand why I need it for the moment. What? Geothermal sounds good to me. And geothermal, yes. So the transition to a different production and consumption of energy will come with this burden. And the problem is more or less the same as we have seen in transition from authoritarian to democratic rule. These countries have to walk and to go through a valley of tears. And the question is, how do we organize it? Do we distribute the burden fair? And I don't see it that we will be able. It will be again the lower half of society who will pay most of it and will suffer most of it. But this will become a major problem. So the output of political system becomes, in times of deep crises, becomes more and more important, sometimes more important than input, democratic participatory input, or system theorists name throughput, all the decision making and adjudication of political system within political decision within a political system. So, and in the middle, I have structures and actors. I selected 4 levels where it will be decided whether a regime is democratically resilient. We have to look at the first level to constitutional powers, how executive, legislative, and judiciary are interacting. Is there still a system of checks and balances? And this is what we know from these de-democratization processes. The first attack goes to, from the executive, goes against the judiciary, the second to the media, and the third one to foreign NGOs especially, or at least they are accused to be foreign NGOs quite often. Party system I was talking about. There is a pluralization, meaning an increase of the number of political parties going on in Europe on the average. This will make coalition formation, government coalition formation more and more difficult, and we have a new powerful actor. These are the right-wing populist parties. They entered government in more than 12 country cases during the last 25 years. So they are already in, have been, or they are in the government. In Hungary, they have an electoral majority. In Poland, they have a majority in the parliament. And now the Italia plus Lega, they have a majority in the parliament as well. Germany is a kind of latecomer. This has very much to do with our barbarian history of the Nazi regime. Therefore, still there is a public discourse. No democratic parties should be allowed for any coalition with these right-wing populists. My hunch is during the next 2 or 3 years, we will see cooperation of your Democristiani, of the Christian democratic parties, at least in the single states in Thuringia and Saxonia of the East German part of the country, because the Christian Democrats wouldn't have another possibility to come back to power again. So power seeking is one of the most eminent driving forces for political parties. I will look at the time, just tell you or name it. Civil society is something extremely important, and I was talking about this yesterday as well. Don't count only the number of NGOs. This is what a huge enterprise did at the Johns Hopkins University. Look whether these NGOs are able to build bridges between different classes, bridges between different milieus, bridges between camps with a different worldview, because polarization and cleavages in our societies are driving our societies apart. There's no longer such a thing as one society. Then you will have sub-societies, and they don't communicate with each other. They even don't marry each other or find a partner with each other. If you look at the United States, as funny as it sounds, a Democrat would never marry another Republican or a Republican partner. And if Karl Marx, Alexis de Tocqueville, one of my favorite philosophers, are right, then the United States of America hold the mirror of the future to the European society with a certain timeline. So polarization, segmentation, fragmentation of the society is a major problem, and this decides about democratic stability. This is quite a rough summary, but you can think about how to modify certain elements of it, or how to describe it better than I could do it here. now. This is what I have already said about democratic resilience and the level of constitutional powers. We should, on the party system, I would like to add it, we should distinguish between semi-loyal parties. I would say most of the right-wing populists are not simply extremist parties. They are semi-loyal to the democratic system. They are using a democratic institution, which makes them even more dangerous to democracies at smaller parties, which are simply Stalinist or fascist parties. They are hollowing out the democratic institutions, procedures, and values from within. Here I was distinguishing between bridging and bonding social capital. This is what our societies need very eagerly, and the one I think is, I was talking about this as well, and I put one of the points out of it, and you may teach me and tell me how it is in your country. What you could see in many West European countries is that political problems become moralized in the public discourse. So it's no longer a question of interest. It's no longer a question of forging compromise. In the moment where you say the migration question, the climate question, the war question, your position is amoral. It cannot be tolerated. You are a racist because you don't want to have immigrants. You are a Putin understander because you don't criticize him sufficiently. So you moralize it. At the moment where you moralize it, you exclude. And democracy is very much about inclusion, not exclusion. Exclusion is what the right-wing populists do on ethnic terms or sometimes of racist terms. But democracy, we cannot give up these people who are voting for these parties. We have to include them. We don't regain them for democracy if we are saying you are amoral. So this is a discourse, and I assume for a moment that you are more or less on this cosmopolitan left liberal camp. This is the way of our arrogant dominance of the discourse. Remember Antonio Gramsci, who thought who is able to form to establish an hegemony of the public discourse might have a straight access to political power. I think the Greens who dominate to some extent the good media, the discourse in Germany, they might not really understand that this is not a ticket, so to say, to political fair burden sharing. I was already talking about, and I hope the last slide is already here. I was talking about that output in times of crisis becomes sometimes more important than new forms of participation, which are quite often from citizen assemblies and other forms of participation in NGOs. Very often something which enriches, enlarges the opportunities for political participation of you, of me, of the well-educated people. If you look who is in NGOs, these are very often young people with academic education and not the lower classes, which we somehow marginalized now for decades. Last slide, and I probably have said already something of it. we are going through. Interesting for the historians of view would be to compare the 1920s, when so many democratic regimes fell apart and transited to authoritarian rule. What is the difference to the 2020s now? And one is certainly that the major democracy might have a more democratic resilience than the younger ones had in the 1920s. The major attack, I have to be clear after my talk, criticizing my own camp from time to time, the major attack comes from right-wing populist parties, and they are powerful, and they give identity, an offer of identity to the people, and the people are looking for identity in times of seemingly unresolvable crisis. But what we, just to mention it briefly, what we should avoid, what I was saying with an over-moralistic understanding of politics, we should not react illiberal to the illiberals. Now, in my country, there is a discourse we should increase, strengthen the militant democracy, meaning banning right-wing populist parties. As nasty as I perceive these parties, I would never accept that they should be banned. This is a limiting of pluralism, and this is something which brings us on the slippery slope. We have to win back these people. Therefore, banning it, even by a constitutional court, is not a real democratic weapon. Nevertheless, now because it goes against the right, the left liberal camp has many sympathies for these banning, so to say, getting into conflict with their own liberal values. So we are obviously ready in some issues to exchange our democratic values against the right solution of the problem. This is what we see with the right-wing populist if it comes to excluding the other, and we see it with the Greens or left liberal camp if it comes to climate. You can understand sometimes the impatience, but impatience is something which can be poison for democracy. Then you have bridges between those who think the nation state is over. This is very often what left liberal cosmopolitans are thinking about, but the lower classes very much are relying on a strong state, on a strong welfare state, which cannot be constructed supranationally, at least not so far. And then burden sharing, and I leave it aside what I mean with epistem, I even cannot pronounce it, epistemicizers and deniers of the corona discussion. So we have which role does discussion science play, and I leave it with these last words, and I'm curious what you have to say and how you challenge what I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wolfgang. Really keeping our emphasizing building bridges and how actually connected to what we discussed yesterday and how we hold more and awareness for liberation in different areas, and there are also for which areas also. Now I'm happy to open the floor for discussion, so let's see what are the comments. We can collect maybe 2 or 3 questions and then we will change the moment to respond. So Ivana.
So I'd like to ask you to elaborate more. How do you think to reconcile something that I perceive as a kind of contradiction? your injunction on one hand to build bridges to reduce polarization, on the other hand, your insistence that, as have called on Sarita, should be retained against populist parties, if I got it right. So, where is the point that should be crossed in bridges if we have to win over these people? Winning over mercenary parties and not the parties or something else. And maybe another question would be, who do you have primarily in mind when you say this should be done or we should do it? Is it more any of us, ordinary people, or we as professionals, or political actors higher up on the levels of political structure that you identified?
Can I respond immediately out of my limited cognitive resources? And since I cannot take notes while I'm listening, these are certainly more than one question. I start with, so to say, the more practical part, and then I work myself up to the more theoretical part. As I have said, accountability in the three forms I was mentioning, the horizontal, the diagonal, and the vertical accountability, tells you that there must be many different actors involved to stop such a process of de-democratization. And how should we stop it? And if I say easily, we should not ban these parties because we limit pluralism. And in this case, I am normatively very much in favor of radical pluralist society. What would we then do with left populists, for example? Just in brackets, I remember when I was politically socialized in the 1970s, we were observed by the internal secret service and we were banned from getting a job in the public sector. It was as ridiculous when I was during my last years in high school at a very leftist organization and in a provincial town in Bavaria, and the internal secret service constructed a file. And later on, when I went to study in Heidelberg, my first job offer at the university was a research assistant for track and field athletics, so practical exercises for sports people, which I was denied to get because they have 4 events where I obviously have brought my political opinion to the public later on. You can see later on I made it then through sports to the Institute of Political Science. I mean, back to it. I don't have illusions that we can win the top elites of the right-wing populist parties. They are indeed fascist, which I see in Germany, for example. But the thumb rule, empirical thumb rule in Germany now, they are good for 20% of the popular vote from surveys. They only got 12% in the last election, but now they are increasing. The estimate is that at least half of it are protest votes. And I think that we have to convince them not to take over their opinion. Therefore, I'm looking at the output. We have to show that the effect or the system has to show that we can solve these problems effectively and at the same time fair. Fair in a Rawlsian or whatever sense, so that all people have to carry the burden as far as they can. So is there a disjunction, or is there a contradiction between the fight against the right-wing populist parties and our to regain them? I will answer this way, that there are different parts of these right-wing parties, and you might enlighten me what, for example, the electorate of the Vučić government is composed of. Whether they are simply authoritarian inclined voters, or there is a desire for national identity, there is a Kosovo question, and all these things. And I think we cannot give it up. In some country they have a majority. How should we do it? Should we ban the Italia? Or so I'm very skeptical of normative and normative.
Following question.
Yeah. The question I go. We do totally either resilience, however, I'm somewhat skeptical for defining in terms of adaptation. So sometimes the challenges for the environment are so severe that actually there is some kind of phase transition to speak to universe. So it entails a radical form of change. So after the 2008 financial meltdown, the issue was that there was adaptation and not severe change of the system. Also, in that sense, I think that the issue with creating resilient democratic institutions is to open up space for other forms of representation, for example, radical democracy, participatory democracy, not in terms of experiment, but in terms of constitutional protection of this kind of interactions. So the issue is, whether or not this adaptation actually is the key, and in that sense, what's your opinion about whether or not resilience, or where does resilience departure from the old liberal idea of gradual change? So that's the first question. And the second one is, when you speak about climate changes and the challenges that go on to this issue, which is defined through science, I was wondering what's the role of social science. Because obviously we know a little bit more about climate change than the regular folks, but still not extent research. And now, where does our alliance go? Do we talk to the decision makers, or do we talk to the public? So yeah, that's the question. Otherwise, I totally agree that this is something, the challenges that we are facing here will, be very resilient, unfortunately. Thank you.
It's always a bad habit if the person who is asked, starting with a sentence, "This is a very good question." But indeed, it is, and I certainly cannot sufficiently respond to it. But again, right. The first point, 2008, the financial meltdown, the financial crisis of the West, especially. Should it be, or you are describing it, there was simply an adaptation, or more or less an adaptation to the capitalist rule of a financialized form of capitalism, so meaning dominance of the capital markets. I think this is the right description, but I think it was wrong to do it. Because this is one of the rare windows of opportunities where you really can reorder capitalism. Capitalism is to some extent stronger as a system than democratic system. Therefore, the Fukuyama idea, now there is victory of the political and the economic liberalism finally the West won. It's right for capitalism, but it's not very much the case for democratic systems. So the decision makers missed the opportunity of reordering the rules or redefining the rules. There was a brief window of opportunity. Nevertheless, if we are talking about reordering the economy, then we have to calculate with the over-dominant actor, the United States of America, or let's say the Anglo-Saxon form of capitalism. So, right, this was an adaptation to the rule. It should have been a reorganization for a more stable economic world and probably for a more just economic world. And this is not only something like people, you and me are asking for. This is something where more and more people feel unfairly treated by the political and economic system. And the perception of many people is not, they do not blame capitalism, they blame the government. They blame the political system. And this is one of the permanent problems of capitalism. By the way, I have a chapter on capitalism and democracy in this wonderful book as well. I'm rather skeptical. I cannot talk about if we should engage in a degrowth economy, which I find extremely unconvincing, even one could wish it. But there are not very many alternative economic regimes. We would be satisfied. Climate change, role of social science. What I think is there is a kind of informal, or what I observe, informal coalition between science and social science. There is even an international and strong national association of a group called Scientists for Future. And if you look who is there, you have scientists, physicists, and working on this issue side on side with economists and social scientists, because it's clear these mega crises, which appear at the first moment as scientific problems, are in the same way problems for the society as well. The society has to accept the transformation of policies. And if they don't accept, they will challenge the government, and then they will challenge the classic politica, and they will challenge, in the end, the democratic regime. I have the impression that the chance for social scientists and political scientists was never that high as it, or never, you should never, you should say never, but I cannot remember that it was as high as it is now. This might be a very West European German observation, but I can only see how often we appear in the prime time news and the prime time talk show. So obviously they are interested in it. And it's again migration, climate, war. This is not that much inequality. This is obviously, we are used to it. But many social scientists, political scientists are asked in the freer country, and I know it somehow from Italy as well, and there is similar observation. But we have to avoid an arrogant talk from top. We should not be opportunistic, but we should try to include, not to exclude. Easily said.
We have Sasha, Philip, Dan, and for you. So that's
my question is, what, in your opinion, makes Germany more resilient to authoritarianism? And just as form of explanation, it's really commendable you try to make a general argument about political systems globally, and it requires certain reductions and generalizations. Okay, when you refer to Germany, you, in a way, it looks like you're saying what's happening in USA is going to happen in Europe. Europe is a bit slower, and what is happening in other countries will happen in Germany. We are a bit slower than others in making these coalitions with right-wing parties. Now, I'm not sure that this is all you would say at this point. And I know there are three more questions, so I should keep it brief. But is there something in the German system that is making general public less prone to authoritarian tendencies? Maybe it is the way that the whole state apparatus, educational system, the type of work. So Germans are more faced with ultimate consequences of nationalism, of war, and so on, and they're less prone to embrace. Of course, the concern is if right-wing wins a nationalist win in Germany, after all these countries in Europe, then we could really be in a big problem.
It's always, or it has been for me always problematic if I am talking about Germany abroad and arguing maybe Germany is performing better than other countries. This has very much to do, again, even I was not born at this time, these most horrendous 12 years in history happened, but this made me always reluctant. I don't think from Germany to learn from Germany is to learn to win. Nevertheless, history plays a role. I think there's still a taboo which you don't find in many other countries if it comes to rightist parties. So I don't think the public is so much different from other West European countries, where I know empirically more than East European countries, but there is a certain level, always has been, on anti-Semitism, which is in public discourse still the biggest crime you can commit. Normally it kills the politician if they won a wrong word on the Jewish question and the Holocaust, for example. So the legacy of history still plays a role that public discourse, not the public itself. The public discourse cannot and will not accept racist and sexist is something different. Racist and xenophobic and anti-Semitic attitudes of the speaker. So this kind of historical firewall, which still works, but I see it is eroding. It is eroding, and probably the Christian democratic problem, not finding allies for their governing majority, is taking out another brick from the wall. Why do I think what happens in Germany, why do I think what happens in the United States will happen in Europe and in Germany as well? Of course, I was tempted by these two philosophers, and I think it's so nice that 200 years ago they diagnosed something we are living through, but it's certainly not very intellectual or scientific, this response. more scientific response would be it will happen that we have similar problems. We have similar problems, and as I have said, these mega problems constitute a trend. And we are living in a globalized world where national borders do not have the same significance. By the way, this is, as they had in the past, this is one of the big assets for right-wing populists, so to say, reclaiming nation states with strict borders. Globalization, and Marx would be the first one who would say these are naive and romantic illusions about the development. So there are common problems, there are common trends, and there are common no answers to these questions up to now, which really convince. Therefore, I do think these problems will not hit this country across the Atlantic. It already is hitting us as well, because we are not very much better in dealing with these challenges. We might be, some of the countries might be better in dealing with polarization, but certainly not Poland, for example. It's a deeply split society, more than Hungary. In your country, you know it much better than I do, but it doesn't seem to me a very consensual society at the moment. Last point, what is strong in Germany? Therefore, it's hard to explain with this tradition, these horrendous regime of the Nazis between 33 and 45 is a judiciary. So Germany was one of the few countries which had established the rule of law system, rule of law system before they had a democracy. And one of the problems of the younger democracies after mid-70s or after 89 is they established both at the same time. And sometimes the electoral system, participatory system works, but the rule of law is highly defective. This has been the other way around. I have a chapter on Corona and democracy in this book as well. And here the courts played an important role, and there isn't a colonization of the judiciary as you can see in many other countries. This is one of the assets. Civil society, I think, is weaker than it is in the Scandinavian countries, so it is important. But in a way, maybe I'm too Teutonic or German, German that I still have trust in the tradition.
Thank you very much. I mean, I have many, I would have many questions. Obviously, such topic that you can even go back to ancient times and relaunch the discussion against and in favor of democracy. Take into account what democracies do to their own citizens, well, citizens also. But I will make my question more focused, and it's related to transition, to so-called transition. Here in Serbia, in the region of former Yugoslavia, but this can be applied also to the issue of Western and Eastern Germany. And I was wondering about your stance on this highly normative approach to democracy or democratization in the context of transition, and the linkage between this democratization and the so-called modernization. In this place where we are now, we are often, it's been 30 years since we started talking about modernization in terms of de-Ottomanization, catching up with the developed world, not only politically, not only economically, but also culture. And I think that you could feel it to an extent in the context of Western and Eastern Germany. It's not by chance that we are having these tendencies that you talked about, first Pegida, then AfD being the strongest in the eastern part of Germany, which is still perceived in the West, not only as economically backward, which is in comparison to the West, which is a fact, but also culture. So I'm wondering, what is your stance on this branch of literature in general that is making this quite tight nexus between cultural westernization or so-called modernization on the one hand and modernization on the other?
Boy. I start with the easier part again, with East Germany, whether they are not economically but also culturally, difficult term, culturally backward oriented. It's typical what we call Wessi. We distinguish between Wessi and Ossi. Ossi are the East Germans, Wessi are the West Germans. And cultural, if we talk about political cultural values, it would be more comfortable to talk about. There is indeed what we observe, at least by surveys, an higher demand for authoritarian leaders than in the West. There is also a higher belief that the classe politica is simply cheating, is simply a group or an elitist group of people who look for their advantages. But why do we have more authoritarian spread values in East Germany? One is very often discussed, doesn't convince me very much, is because many people still have these authoritarian legacy in their consciousness from the dictatorial East German regime. But if you look to the surveys, they even let those people voting for the right-wing populist parties or opting for authoritarian values among the younger people. But there is a disappointment. A disappointment because East Germany did not provide the same set of life chances very fast after the rupture, after the reunification. And there's certainly a certain arrogance of the Western people. And now an additional point comes into play: capitalism. If you look about the distribution of property between East and West Germany, you see that more than 90% of the property is located in the West. So the per capita property is much, much, much lower in East Germany. This has to do that with the heritage of the people. In the West, in the East, they did not have land, they did not have firms, they did not even have houses very often. And this is all what is now being inherited by the generation after the boomers. They will inherit, what do you say? Inherit?
Income.
No, it's not income. Again, it's property. Complete inherit, right. They will inherit the houses, and if you inherit just a simple house in Munich, you are having more than 1 million or even 2 million. But the East Germans, the housing prices are much lower. They do not have, if you have it in an East German city, especially in smaller cities, it's much, much lower. So this deepens the economic cleavage and the cleavage of life changes. This is an unfair, historically explainable cleavage rushing through both countries. And what we also see, what you probably know, that right-wing populist parties are especially elected by male person, I'm not belonging to the lowest 1/3 of the society, but on the lower strata of the middle classes with a high insecurity what the future will bring. And insecurity and uncertainty is a fertile ground for right-wing populists. So, and they have to some extent, I completely understand, and they are to some extent right if they are criticizing the West. They simply took over East Germany. And I don't know how it could have been done differently. It has to be done at that time also a window of opportunity, the reunification, how to do it differently. But the way it has been done is something which still lingers on, creating these problems. Or if you look to the good jobs in the public service, very often taken over by West Germans in East Germany. Or they kicked out all social scientists, philosophers, economists, lawyers from university. And who got the jobs? The second row of the West German social scientists and economists, which did not find a job in western part of the country. So there were, on the one side, a kind of luxurious transition because the rich state compensated it much better than in other countries. But on the other side, there was this arrogance, dominance, and there was capital on the one side, and the other side, there was no capital so far, and this cannot be changed in 2 or 3 decades. Last point, the normative modernization. If I'm not completely wrong, Karl Marx is one of the first theorists of modernization. If you read the Capital or even the Communist Manifest, then he predicted this globalization of capitalism. And there was the Hegelian idea, probably in Marxian thinking, there will be an evolution, and the state will come to itself in this process. So I'm skeptical about this, but I'm also skeptical about the postmodern French social theorists, where I do not understand too much, and sometimes I even don't understand. So you have this tradition of an evolution to a better state of the economy, of the society, and so forth. Marx even believed, as we all know, that the repressive state will disappear. But I don't think they have anything to say, the modernization theorists now have to say what is going on, because we are living in regressive times, not in progressive times if it comes to equality, if it comes to fairness, and if it comes to democratic standards. Therefore, I see the major lack in modernization theory, even if they are right in the long run, they don't have any good explanation for the short.
Thank you. we really need to get out of this room at one sharply because there is a driver waiting for the professor. So we have 3 more questions, and I suggest you be very brief, and maybe that we collect some questions and then move on.
Thank you. Thank you for this great lecture. I'd like to ask you to shed more light on the issue of negative partisanship in the surveys you mentioned before, especially in relation with the first question you received about the possibility of, let's say, more liberal parties building bridges toward voters of populist parties. So my question would actually be, what are the trends in Germany? Are voters of, for example, the European more inclined to vote for mainstream parties under certain conditions, or anything like never? Thank you.
As I said, you should never say never again. Trends in Germany, what I have said is at least the surveys are telling us now during the last year. From the survey, the inclination to vote for the AfD doubled in 1 year, from more or less 10% to 20%. So surveys are not indeed elections. There will be something which plays for the right-wing populists. The next election will be European elections. And European elections are seen in Germany and in many of the European member states, not as election voting and electing the European Parliament, but giving, so to say, a warning signal to the national government. So there are so-called second-order elections. You express something different from what these elections are for. This will mean that the right-wing populists will perform probably even better because they will get more protest votes. And then we have a kind of construction mistake in our constitution that we have statistically seen each 3rd or 4th month an election in Germany, a state election. And these state elections are also federalized. They are discussed against the background of the governing coalition. And normally there is a trend voting against the national government, strengthening the federal part. The next elections will be in East Germany, in Saxonia and Thuringia. And there could be a chance for the AfD to become the strongest party. So the catch-all parties, which have deep roots still in West Germany, despite all the erosions, do not have these roots in East Germany. They were transferred, they were transplanted, but you cannot transplant that easily the roots of it. This is what we can observe now, that there is a very fast erosion of the so-called established party, especially for the formerly catch-all party. The trend is, so to say, against what we call the traffic light coalition, meaning Greens, Liberals, Greens, yellow are the Liberals, and the red are the Social Democrats. It's against all of these 3 parties. All of the 3 parties are losing. But the main oppositional party, the CDU, is not really winning, not going to previous electoral results. This tells us something that the main benefiter is the main of the true, so to say, radical opposition party. And these are the right-wing populists. And in the moment where the right-wing populists are going up, the left, the old transformed regime party of the communist East Germany, which transformed to an, I would say, clear leftist democratic parties, is going down because they attracted also protest votes. And these protest votes jumped from explicit leftist positions to explicit rightist positions. So the decline of the left takes on the account of the right-wing populists as well. Trends are not very good for the Democratic Party at the moment. And again, I think we should not only claim that they are incapable, they have to deal with those problems you cannot really solve. You cannot solve the migration problem without the European Union. You cannot solve the climate question without India, China, and the United States of America. The people see this and they debate problem solving, and this will bother these parties.
Okay, we are fine. I think we get started with the question. So hold up and then thank you.
But I can do it.
So my question is, I will my question is, you mentioned the cultural parties and their decline. Do you think that this is a problem, or do you think that this is a trend that should be embraced in the sense of maybe new democratic parties should actually focus more on more particular interests of particular classes of social groups?
It is both. It is a problem, and it sounds paradoxical, but it's also a democratic gain. The democratic gain for the people is now they do not have simply two programmatic offers, from a center-left catch-all party to a center-right catch-all party, which was the case in quite a few European countries. Now they have in Germany, for example, 6 parties or 7 parties in parliament. In the past, very often they had 2.5. And voters can now select the party which is much closer to their values and their interests, because there's a wider range of programmatic actors. If you are thinking ecologically and somehow left, you in the past you have probably voted for social democratic parties, but they did not do very much in ecological matters. Now you can vote for the Greens. Or if you are ultra-conservative, you can today vote for the right-wing populists and no longer for the Christian Democratic Party. So there is a broader range of programmatic offers, and we can vote much more specific for those countries who are closer to our values and interests. On the other side, it means these two parties were integrating on a political level the society quite well. So if you look to Italy, and you have on the one side the Democristiani, the Democrazia Cristiana, which was always in government. On the other side, you had a reformist communist party who polled 34.4% in the mid-1970s, and they had a huge. They had deep roots in society. They organized civil society in Circoli della Ricreazione for the pensionisti. And the other one was a church, a Catholic church. they played an integrative role, whether you want it or not. But they brought at least the people together in two camps and they communicated with something. So the political integration machines, which were these big catch-all parties, which we need now very much, are disappearing. And this is certainly a problem which we have not solved yet, and maybe we even cannot solve it because we want to live in a more pluralized world. Think about the market. The market is completely diversified, and we are used to select which kind of iPhone we want to have, and we have 10 different ones, and we don't like to have only one. And these habits of consumption on the market, we expect to some extent on the political market as well. Therefore, I think this is another reason why there's no way back to this big Volkspartei, the big petrol party.
Thank you very much. A lot of questions, and I think discussion was really good. And I think you didn't have so much to do with them as much as thinking answers from you. You could see the faces. So thank you once more for having a chance to discuss all these important and relevant issues for us globally. I know that you're continuing tomorrow at the Political Sciences with Professor Slavish Orlovic, who will be your host and he's here with us today. Thank you for joining us. Let's have one more upload to guests.